Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Hail to the King. That's right, 70 years of Godzilla films in retrospective. I am having so much fun doing these. This is episode 7. We are talking about Godzilla versus King Ghidorah from 1991. Then we're going to go into Godzilla and Mothra, Battle for Earth from 1992. And then Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2 from 1993. A lot of these movies have set forth. It's like sort of like a strand of movies that happened after 1985 that kind of continued into Biollante, and then these movies, and they continue on all the way down the line till Destroya, telling this sort of one tale of where Godzilla is going, who he's fighting, and a lot of faces along the way. It's very interesting to me. Of course, my amazing panelists are with me. Trevor Stottlemyre from Ambassador Radio and Media. Go check him out. He's awesome. You guys have seen him throughout this whole journey. And if you guys haven't been following him over at Ambassador, you are doing yourself a disservice. And also, of course, Sir Sturdy is here from Horror Sir Sturdy and Popcorn and Pints. If you're not checking them out over there, please, guys, come on. These guys are amazing, and they're so smart and it's so brilliant about all the stuff with movies and music and so much more. So please go follow them, check them out. It's all in the description below. And make sure to hit like, subscribe, and follow us here so you know what's going on with us and Godzilla, the Scene Stunts podcast, and so much more. So let's get started. We're going to bring them aboard, and we're going to get talking about these movies. All right, gentlemen, welcome to the show. We are back again for another round with some more, I think, awesome movies. We're really onto a good sort of roll of fun movies that kind of mimic some really great classics. We're going to start with Godzilla versus King Ghidorah from 1991. This one sort of follows time travelers coming back from the future to help stop Godzilla, help Japan stop Godzilla because he's going to bring on some sort of threat in the future. And unfortunately, that's not exactly, everything's not exactly as it seems. But welcome. Let's talk about it. How you guys doing today?
Doing well. Thank you. 7 episodes already. I can't believe it. It's crazy.
I know. 7 weeks in. 7 weeks into this. I'm doing good, though. I'm doing good today.
Good.
We're getting there. Yeah, it's a lot of fun talking about these movies. Really, because there's so many different things, twists and turns you see with this mega character and all the things that are introduced within this franchise, that it's just been so much fun kind of exploring it the whole way. So
agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So going into the 90s now, we're out of the 80s. We're so far past the Showa era. Going into the 90s, we get King Ghidorah back. I see a lot of this one, of course. You get a lot of Terminator 2 in it, a lot of other elements to it. What did you guys think about this movie when you guys checked it out?
For me, this is one I started having fun with. I know with the last ones, besides the third film, I wasn't really crazy about. This one I started having more fun with. The visuals definitely looked 90s, early 90s at that. It was one of those things where it's like, what I'm enjoying about this is like each era, like once you pay attention to it, you kind of know where you're at. Like, okay, this is the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and this is definitely the 90s. It's just like, it's so 90s, it's not even funny. And what makes it even cooler is because it's 90s in a whole nother country. So it's not even here, but you just know it's still the 90s. Like we all have our own little, I think we have our own little visuals or something that's very similar in those eras. And it's just like the 90s, Godzilla, almost Power Rangers-esque as far as the looks again from a couple episodes ago, but almost a little better at the same time. Like cleaner at the same time, as weird as that sounds. It was like almost Power Rangers-esque with the big, with the Megazord fight and stuff, but still a little bit cleaner. It was like the Power Rangers just kept the look from the older Godzilla. They was like, listen, we got this, we're sticking with this. I know the newer Godzilla looks a little bit better than us, but we're sticking with the old ones, and that's it. But this was a fun one for me. This was definitely a fun film for me.
Yeah. This one for me was a lot of fun too. But Trevor sort of switches up a lot. I think they're always meant to be fun, and you being our resident, like sort of, we call you the kaiju snob here. If you could they seem to be taking it in a different direction. It seems like to be one sort of storyline after this, instead of like the Show era where it was like sequels, but you can make an argument that they were all sort of standalone at some and for the most part. What was the direction? Why did they choose this direction? And was it on purpose that they were sort of mimicking these other movies?
Well, first of all, you have to look at heading into the Heisei period, and you have to include Godzilla versus Biollante, which is the most expensive Godzilla film at that point, and for all intent and purposes, a box office floppy, but it didn't kill the franchise. One thing that Toho was willing to try again, and one thing they could say is the film was good and it looked beautiful. So they brought back basically the same people. Omari is directing. You have the same, crew doing the special effects. So yeah, in short, there's a definite shift that basically is called "We are competing with American films," and you can tell in Biollante it has more of a Western feel. The storylines, everything, you can tell there's influence from blockbusters, which are going head to head, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, at some point, pertaining to, if nothing else, M11. But no, it was the choice to bring Godzilla back as this like exceedingly larger curmudgeon douche was actually on purpose, because it was actually the other monsters that were in certain ways more popular at the time, even though they were coming up on some major anniversary of Toho Studios.
Okay, so for this then, and I want to ask you both, as we see Godzilla, what was your, after Biollante, what was your impression of Godzilla in this movie? Because he did come off as kind of like, they're playing him off as the villain in this, really, and I didn't love it, because I got 1985 where he was coming from, but I thought when you get the Godzilla versus, we're going to kind of go back to that Show era where it's like he's going to come in and save the day. So I feel like they get back to that. I feel like there's a shift at some point, but right now, the next few movies, it does feel sort of
there's no sympathy for Godzilla.
Yeah. How do you guys feel about that in these movies?
I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing. It's a little, I guess it's a little change. I'm sure it pissed some people off back in the day, especially if you're a diehard Godzilla fan. But I guess it wasn't bad for a little change for however long they've done it for. Because I mean, people still love Godzilla, and it's been a long time, 70 years. So they did something right. They did. I mean, even in the wrong, they did something right.
Well, I think it's a generalized public viewpoint change, and how the films really went into the concept of, Godzilla, even in the subplot of the Futurians going back in time and, strategically putting the Godzillasaurus not where it was supposed to be when the 54 movie came out. So Godzilla does not exist, but man still, no matter what, figures out how to create Godzilla. And mankind is at fault for everything Godzilla is pissed about. So it is just a generalized shift in, public viewpoint. So Godzilla is not really a villain per se, but he is a horror that we've made that has more respect for the earth than we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get that. And there is another there's actually something that sort of comes about in this one that we really don't get in many Godzilla films beforehand. Not saying that hasn't happened, but back to back we get a character introduced, Miki Saigusa, who becomes a mainstay for a number of movies. She is sort of a guiding light within the Godzilla franchise for, I say, about 6 or 7 movies going
the
forward.
ESP girl, basically.
I'm sorry?
The ESP girl.
Yeah. So she can connect with Godzilla and baby Godzilla going forward, as we'll see in the next movies as we talk about it. But how do you feel about this character? And if you can, Trevor, if you could elaborate a little bit more about her character for everybody listening or watching rather.
Well, these three movies also show a shift in who are your main protagonists in the cast. These films are, the Heisei films are by far more female character based in a way that the Showa era wasn't. You're having female characters take major leads in these films and have key pivotal plot purposes. And this is actually quite simple. At the time, a lot of people were not going to movies, but you still had blockbusters, and people still went. And in Japan, the majority of people who were going to theaters were women. Now, this kind of pertains to the next film, but it kind of gives you an idea of why it goes in the direction it is. At one point, Toho runs a contest / survey, public opinion poll into who is your favorite monster. Well, it wasn't Godzilla. It was Mothra, and the market research showed that it was spiked heavily in the female population. And that in itself affects, how, these films are made. And I think it's wonderful because you do get stronger female characters in these three films. Well, actually, you have to include Biolante because actually one of the female protagonists is Biolante. So the Heisei has a different flavor based on that alone. And, the sad thing is, honestly, Toho was looking at it more on a financial level versus maybe we should, heighten the importance of our female characters.
Okay, I like that. Thank you. I appreciate that. And Sir Sturdy the Ghost is going to Sturdy. What do you think about the change in storylines here, where it's a little more thematic and we have these characters being introduced and like these different like G forces introduced and these storylines are introduced that kind of they play into each other that are going into the movies as they go through, as they kind of like play out as plot.
Yeah, I'm not mad at him. I'm really not. I feel like it's I guess you would say a refresher. You get that refresher story to where it's like, okay, maybe with this era right here, we don't want to keep doing the same as the last one to where it kind of dies down. People get bored of it. It's like, let's kind of freshen it up. And I know you said it, but this one in particular here wasn't a hit in the box office, but I do feel like it was that one to where
Biolante was
that
not
one
a hit at the box office. This actually did well.
Oh, this one did do well.
Yeah.
You said which one wasn't a hit at the box office?
This was a hit for them.
Biolante was the most expensive and was more of a flop. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, okay.
This one actually, technically, the only one that did really better was Godzilla versus King Kong. As far as actual box office numbers based on the economy time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. They improved that one, didn't they?
Yeah.
But yeah, getting back to that though, I think it's a good thing though. Just change is good, and in franchises, especially one this freaking big, eventually you got to make up some changes to not only keep some there, and you may lose some people, but to bring some new faces in, some new fans in. To again, 70 years they've been doing something right.
Yeah, I like it. Well put. And before we go on to Godzilla and Mothra, the Battle for Earth, you did mention off camera there was some controversy that was behind Godzilla versus King Ghidorah.
Yeah, well, I think I had mentioned this before in a previous podcast, but unlike anything in the Showa era up to Godzilla 1985, and there was even a small release of Godzilla versus Biolante because they could get a distributor. This film, for some bizarre reason, because if you take the film in its entirety, it's a very different message. But there was quite a campaign in the United States to point out that this particular Godzilla film was anti-American. Now, with that, you have to take a look at the late 1980s, pardon me, the late 1980s and the 1990s sentiment about the Japanese as in comparison to sentiment about the Chinese right now. In those times, it was very, people were constantly making jokes or honestly felt that like Japan was taking over the world. They were buying companies. They were buying. They were eventually going to buy continents. I mean, they were buying a lot. There was also some pretty bad blood between them and Hollywood because both Columbia Pictures and Universal, no, Sony bought Columbia, and then Universal UA was also bought by a Japanese company. So there's not a lot of love there already, but okay. So part of the plot point in this particular Godzilla film, Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, is about a group of Japanese soldiers that survive, and their equivalency of a platoon is the only one to survive, and they're on Lagos Island. And how do they survive? A Godzillasaurus or dinosaur protects them. And they basically gives its life to defend them. This was viewed very, very un-American. There were television shows like Entertainment Tonight had survivors of Pearl Harbor on in segments going, I saw this and this was un-American, and that really wasn't the case. But it made it that film did not make it into the United States in any form until 7 years after it came out. And to this day, those are the hardest, that Heisei era is the hardest to truly find copies of, because they couldn't get distributors anymore. Part of it was the US kind of felt at a certain point that people fell out of the big monster craze. But so not to babble on too much, but how this controversy is absurd is the film also paints Shindo. And Shindo was a survivor of Lagos, and Godzilla saved him. But he has gone on to be such a massive venture capitalist that he is destroying Japan. And in the film, Godzilla blatantly, almost kind of, silly, gives this man his comeuppance, because this is the guy who, did a armed salute to a dying dinosaur. But as Godzilla is going through the city, he comes to Shinto's building and he's staring out, and Godzilla stares at him, and it goes back and forth. Godzilla cries a little bit and then blows the fucker away. Just as the same effect that, once the spaceship is put in front of Godzilla, it opens up and he just blows them away. So that goes back to my whole saying that Godzilla is a kind of curmudgeon and very judgy, and apparently you can upset him by leaving him down, as Shinto did. So
yeah. I thought it was this was one that really stood out to me. I had a lot of fun with it. I didn't mind the mimicry of like T2, it was just a good time. And going into even like having not really Jurassic Park, but like having those like sort of that whole island sequence of like the dinosaurs kind of, stop motion dinosaur kind of coming through and all the forced perspective of it and everything. Like I dig that. I was like, that's very 90s. I see what you're saying with that, Sturdy. Like I like the whole vibe of it. So to me, this was a good one. I like the jetpacks and everything. Everything involved with it. Just like give me more of that. Like that's fun for me. Like, yeah, I'm good with the kaiju fighting, but in between, if I have to deal with the people, I want it to be G-force and adventure, the Futurins and all this craziness that goes along with it. But
the world's most convoluted plot of any Godzilla film. That was the only thing I didn't care for about it. As you mentioned about its influences, of course, the cyborg M11 is a direct reference to Terminator. And of course, he's also a reference to Bishop and Alien. The Emiko powered Mecha Ghidorah is very much a reference to Ripley at the end of Alien 2. And I mean, I don't know if you guys remember or not, but when the ship that was at Lagos decides to actually retreat, the one military person is called Mr. Spielberg. And the other
I
guy
did notice
said,
that, yeah.
Mr. Spielberg, we're leaving. We don't talk about this, but you can tell your children, which would, on a timeline, make him potentially the father of Steven Spielberg. So Omari does wear his influences on his sleeve like crazy. And that continues.
That's pretty
Wow.
funny. Yeah, so Sturdy, how about you, man? What'd you think about this movie coming out of it? Was this one you'd revisit?
Revisit, probably not, but I did have a fun time with it. I really did have a fun time with it. And again, it was just so freaking 90s that you can't hate it. You have to at least like it, I feel. All right, let me rephrase that. If you were around in that time, if you were born in that, if you're around in that time, and I'll say old enough to remember, you'll get it. You'll know exactly what the hell I'm talking about.
Oh yeah,
I agree. I agree with that. I like it. All right. So going on to our next movie in this episode, Godzilla and Mothra: The Battle for Earth. This one we get Japan is caught in the middle of a three-way battle between Godzilla, the defined Mothra, and her dark counterpart Batara. A very badass looking Mothra, in my opinion. This is sort of an interesting one. Sort of takes like a little bit of an Indiana Jones approach in this, as to where this big company wants. They send it to Infant Island to get a Mothra egg. They also take the peanuts. The peanuts make a big comeback in this one.
As the Cosmos.
As who? As the
Cosmos.
Yeah, what were they?
They were called the Cosmos in the Heisei era.
That's right. The Cosmos is
why. I have no idea, but they were.
I think, yeah, it's probably just an update. This one, I gotta admit, I wasn't a huge fan of this one. This one was a little slow for me. I don't know what it was. I just didn't. I liked Batra showing up in the end. I liked the final fight, but overall, like the story, everything with it, I was like, and it didn't stick out for me. But I'd love to hear what you guys think about it.
It did feel kind of jumbled together. Didn't hate it, didn't love it. It was kind of in the middle for me, but it did feel kind of jumbled together. Like, again, doing something different, doing something a little different. Let's see where this road takes us. And like you're saying, how it was kind of slow. So I'm just like, all right, listen, man. I need to see some fighting. I need to see some damn kaiju battles. And there's too much people now for me. And when it got to it, it was fun, but it wasn't like, it didn't take me to that level of like, oh my goodness, man, like this just excited me. This brought me to that level of like, oh my, like just almost shaking with excitement. It was just kind of all right. I got through it. I liked it, but I don't need slow burns like this. I don't need a slow movie. Like I need more, not even necessarily more action, just more of an interesting story for me. Even just more of an interesting story that kind of just keeps you there and keeps you pulled in. Versus, all right, bring them back to fight, please. At least bring them back to fight for me.
No, yeah. So Trevor, I actually wanted to ask you, like, well, I do want to say this, that water fight was very cool. That was a very cool fight too. Just for the fact that it was Godzilla and a worm. I do like Mothra and such. I don't think I like Mothra as much as everybody else does. But for a water fight between Godzilla and a worm, I thought it was very cool. Trevor, I wanted to ask you, not just what do you think about this movie, but could you fill us in? I love what you said, that this was sort of picked because everybody chose Mothra to sort of come back.
Which then leads to the 3 Mothra films.
Yeah, and I was wondering if you could shine some light on it with us, like what, maybe some more backstory to, within this movie of like what else, like why else this movie was made, and to why Batra and everybody else kind of came about, how they came about.
Well, the concept of Batra had been kicked around for quite a while. And actually, at one point, there was supposed to be a film called Mothra versus Bagan. And that script was kicked around continually. And eventually, it was reworked, and they wanted to include Godzilla. And they actually wanted to do a remake around this time, and I forget which film it was. I think it was actually Mechagodzilla, that the first drafts were to have King Kong in it. Now, this time, based on how everything went, a lot of people held the rights to King Kong. It was way too expensive. So the thought at this Heisei era with Mechagodzilla and now versus Mothra, they were thinking about things that, were eventually going to be done by the legendary Monsterverse. But for me, the most important thing about the Heisei era and what makes it really, really work are two things. The return of Akira Ufube at the guise of his daughter. I honestly think his daughter was just tired of seeing his face and kicked his ass out of retirement. But you had the original composer come in and do 3 new scores for these films. But also you had, and it started with Biolante, you had a gentleman named Takao Okinawa. And Takao was a student of Eiji Tsuburaya. And, these films for me, I find the stories convoluted. I find the characters and the situations almost absurd at times. But two things that make these movies work is, number one, is they have the iconic composer and use that soundtrack. And also, it is the most amazing miniature suitmation string stuff you've ever seen, to the point that any visual effects look even more dated, because it might look a little artificial, but you got to remember that these films have the largest scope of fights, so it's not constantly close-ups. I mean, the special effects by Koichi Kawakita as a supervisor are it's the same jump that Eiji Tsuburaya did with Godzilla, in my opinion. And I think the practical effects are what makes these movies. But that's just my take.
I gotta agree. The practical effects, especially in this movie,
The
are
movies
really
are
good.
beautiful.
Yeah.
They're
What do you think,
gorgeous.
sir? You're a practical effect head.
I love the practical effects. Practical effects I can't complain with, but it's the rest of it.
The
The actual
insanely
movie part of
convoluted
it.
plots. Oh, and I do have one question. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Story. I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
you're good.
Because I brought this up before. And well, actually, maybe I should wait to the next movie because it actually pertains to the next movie. So cut that out, Nick.
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay. So in these 3 films, one of the films shows the return of Manila, or as they basically call him in this film, a Godzillasaurus. And well, he hatches from a Rodan egg. And the closest thing to an explanation the film gives is Godzilla, like some birds, will put his egg in other species' nests. Well, number one, the physics on that one, I don't care how big Rodan or Mothra's nest is. Imagine Godzilla giving birth. It just physically would not happen. But between Mothra and Manila and Rodan and this Godzillasaurus, is this some kind of weird kaiju throuple? I mean,
Oh yeah.
so that bugged me. But
To me, okay, so like kind of rolling into that. So real quick before we do, Godzilla and Mothra, the Battle for Earth. I think Sturdy and I, both said how we feel. It's just not one that I think resonated with us too well. But how did you feel about this one, with Trevor?
I didn't, I actually like the first time Manila showed up. I thought this Manila was kind of creepy.
Oh no, not Manila. Godzilla versus and Mothra.
Oh, Godzilla! I'm sorry. You read any last thoughts?
Yeah. Just what were your thoughts?
I thought it was a truly enjoyable film that has more technical amazement to it versus actually like being a good movie.
Okay, yeah, I would definitely agree to that. I think technically wise, yeah, it's definitely a really good freaking movie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think after the last 2, to get to a point where the story wasn't as interesting to me. I was like, oh wow, well actually I wouldn't even say the last 2, the last 4 movies, The Return in 1985 also included in that, were so good in story that to get here and I'm like, I wish you had just copied the original story of Godzilla versus Mothra versus Godzilla because that was so good. But we're gonna roll into our final film talking tonight. We're actually Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2, which just feels like so weird. 2 episodes ago we talked about Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. And we're at 1993 now. Same year Jurassic Park came out. So the United Nations assembles the ultimate weapon to defeat Godzilla. While scientists discover a fresh pterodon egg on a remote Japanese island. So before we get into, we all know, we just talked about, that's baby Godzilla or Godzillasaurus or Manila or however we want to remember, or Godzuki as we could also. Trevor, can you elaborate a little bit on why they called it Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2, if it's like sort of just a new thing?
You know, the best explanation I can give to that is, that the films, even though they came out in Japan as the titles we know it, they also were shorthanded into direct sequels. So, when people talked about them, they would talk about them as a group of films. So they are, the continuity, no matter how confusing and convoluted it is supposed to be there.
Wow.
So I think that came down to, yet again, to try to create some sort of continuity based on the last Showa film. I don't think it's necessary because Mechagodzilla takes on a totally new, persona beyond what he was in the Showa films. So you have him being a piece of human made with, space titanium stuffs, mecha. And you see in these films, which, even by Alante, you can say to an extent, if you want to say that genetic testing is a form of mecha or hard science fiction. But the mecha thing is very prevalent in this era.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
Mechagodzilla 2 is the pinnacle of that. Just alone the newfangled gadgets that G-Force has. You can tell that was something that was like a marketing decision too. Right now, mecha is popular, which I imagine if you look at, I think Gundam and stuff like that was coming out around that time. So
and Sturdy, for you, so being first watches for a lot of these, we just talked about, and you just watched really for the first time, Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla and Terror of Mechagodzilla, and now you're watching Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2. What did you think of this one comparatively to watching those two from the 70s?
I wasn't crazy about this one.
Really? Okay.
I really wasn't crazy about this one. Like the action was cool, the action was fun. A lot of the visuals, well, all the visuals are always good in these to me. They're always fun. But other than that, I was just kind of bored with it. It just wasn't. I don't know. And it's weird too because if you see the ones that I really really enjoy, again going back to the Power Ranger era, and then going back to something like this with some of these battles, it's you would think I'd like more of these movies than I do, or at the very least, I enjoy this one. But there was just something that just wasn't connecting for me. It just wasn't. It didn't give me that. I don't even want to say that joy. It just wasn't as fun. It just wasn't as fun because now I'm at the point now where it's like these are either going to be good or they're going to be fun, or I'm just not going to like it. And this was just one I just didn't like. It was just one I just didn't like. It had some cool parts to it, but I didn't have enough fun with it to be like, okay, this is enjoyable. This is a fun time to where, going back to your question earlier, if I were to go back, I would not go back to this one. Like if I were to possibly go back, I would possibly watch the other two, but it's just so much to watch. Like this is one of those ones, Mick, once this is over with, the Godzilla thing, I'm gonna be retiring the majority of it, besides maybe -1 and a couple here and there. But yeah, this is one that wouldn't climb out the retirement hole ever for me.
Okay.
To put it like that.
All right. That's it's interesting you say that. I don't know that I feel the same way. I kind of dug this one. I like this one. I enjoyed it. I had some fun with it. I liked the human interaction of it. I liked the introduction of Baby Godzilla. Like it was hokey, it was weird, and I think that's why I liked it. It seemed very late night USA Network type of monster movie. It was almost like a dumbed down Tammy and the T-Rex in a way.
No, I like Tammy and the T-Rex a lot better.
Oh yeah, well, no, but I mean, I definitely got what it was. Like, I just I had some fun with it, and the practicals were fun. The fight scenes were fun. So out of all of these, is it one of my favorites? No. I would, especially with a couple of them coming up, but I think I did, I would stand on that. I did like this one, but I see why you didn't. I also can understand.
I didn't too.
You didn't either, huh?
Well, mine's a little shallow, and and I was even having this discussion with my son today. Is I don't like the Mechagodzilla design. I mean, the legendary design was bad enough, but this, I mean, I know he's supposed to be more of a human created mecha, but compared to the original design of Mechagodzilla, comes to this Mechagodzilla that just kind of looks like a cross between the creature and the Mysterians and that guy at the gym you don't want to hang out with because all he wants to do is show you his muscles. That was kind of my take on it. I never took it really seriously. Yet again, it is a film that aids from the special effects direction, and it might have been one of the last scores for Akira Ifukube. So, those in itself are worth the watch, but I thought the plot was yet again convoluted, and the baby Godzilla thing, there's actually a weird little story on that. So the year that Godzilla had its most success, it wasn't the highest film. It was the highest domestic film. And it was very close, but there was a film called Rex that was directed and produced by a venture capitalist. I don't remember his name, but eventually he ended up going to jail for drug dealing and various cocaine charges. But it was a kids movie about a T-Rex and a girl, and that was really popular. So another thing about the Heisei period is it's very conscious of making financial decisions in its direction, which is not new, but that's also one of the Godzilla film's main complaints with the world at that time. It's being run that the world is destroying itself, but it's funny because the films really start taking more of a notice of the demographic that we want for this film wants this. So there's more of a business end to these films.
Yeah, and I definitely see that, and I can see your point with this movie especially. There's definitely a payoff for baby Godzilla showing up. And we'll see that in a couple of films. So I don't want to spoil that for anybody as we go along. So if you're watching this, thank you. And I want to thank my panelists. That's our final film for the episode. Remember, guys, we're going to be back next week with we'll be watching this week Godzilla versus Space Godzilla from 1994, Godzilla versus Destroyer from 1995, and
I love that film. Sorry.
Godzilla from 1998, the American version. I'm sure we're going to have a really fun time with that one. All right. So let's get into that. But guys, we're going to have a good time with it. Producer Paul may be joining in for that.
Nice.
So let's have fun. So that'll be joining in next week. I want to say thank you to my panelists, Trevor Stottlemyre and Sir Sturdy. Thank you again for joining me. Ambassador Radio and Media, Horror with Sir Sturdy, and Popcorn and Pints. All the links are down in the description below. Go follow. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you can follow more shows like this and other ones as well. Guys, you guys are all awesome. Really appreciate all the support. Remember to be kind to each other.
As always.
Yes, thank you guys. You're amazing. I truly appreciate you, and all of you are also amazing.
A wonderful journey to take with both you guys. So thank you.
I'm so excited.
Yeah,
this is fun.
This is a good time, and I'm really like your takes on a lot of this stuff. So this has been a great time, and just you guys joining us along the way. So remember, hit that like button, hit that follow button, hit that subscribe button, whatever else, and let's just do it. So be kind, stay classy, and take care of yourselves because that's important. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.